I'm Brian Michael, Kenny's Cook, and today we're going to teach you how to make tomato sauce. Now, this version of tomato sauce is not at all what would be considered traditional, and we'll hear about it. But it's fantastic, it's fast, it's easy to throw together, and it's an awesome base for you to move forward with. Whether you want to turn it into some sort of ragu down the road by throwing meat into it, or mushrooms if you're, one of those people. But anyways, nothing left to it but to do it, right? So come on, let's cook.
First, we're going to start with our tomatoes. We're using tomato puree for this from a brand that we trust. Use your favorite, as it's going to play but actually the most vital part of making this recipe work for you guys. But don't worry too much about making sure you have Italian imported San Marzano tomatoes exclusively, because honestly, you can make a great tomato sauce with just about any tomato product as long as it's of high quality. Because we're making a larger batch than usual, we actually have 2 large onions pictured here, but we're only gonna use 1.5 of them because we like to use half an onion per 28 ounce can of tomatoes. We're also using white onions today. Feel free to use Spanish, your Vidalia onions. If you want to, you can actually use 2 to 3 shallots per can of tomatoes, but we had white onions on hand, so that's what we'll be using today. Generally speaking, I'd use about 1 medium-sized carrot per can, but these 2 large boys will get us where we're trying to go with them, because instead of adding a bunch of sugar to balance out the actual can of tomatoes, we're just going to draw that natural sweetness from the carrot here. Then we're going to move on to the spice mixture. It looks like a lot, but that's because of, again, we're doing a larger batch than usual. So per can of tomatoes, what you're going to be looking for is 1 tablespoon dried oregano, 1 tablespoon of kosher salt, 1 teaspoon of red pepper flake, 1 teaspoon of black pepper, and then 1 bay leaf. If you're using dried bay leaves, I would recommend maybe doing 2 to 3 bay leaves per can, just because the flavor on them is really muted. But because we have fresh here, the 2 fresh bay leaves is going to carry the 3 cans, no problem. We're not worried about it. So we're going to talk about the oil real fast. You can use either just butter or just olive oil, but we like the 50-50 mix because we like being able to get the flavors from both. So what we have here is we have a 1/4 cup of olive oil and a 1/4 cup of butter per can. So there you'll see about 3/4 a cup of butter and 3/4 a cup of olive oil. Here we have our balsamic vinegar mixture, if you will, and it's just 2 parts balsamic vinegar to 1 part sugar. In this case, it's 2 tablespoons of balsamic vinegar and 1 tablespoon of sugar, and we do 1 of these per can of San Marzano tomatoes. We'll show you when we throw it in later, but we basically use it to finish the sauce for the last half hour it's cooking. And last but definitely not least, we have tomato paste. We're going to add 2 tablespoons of tomato paste per can, and it's just going to help add a depth and richness to the sauce that you'd almost be hard-pressed to find otherwise, because we're not going to give it the long, drawn-out cooking process that some more traditional sauces require. But we're going to still get tons of flavor out of it, and it's just, there's just something about it that I feel is essential to making tomato sauce, because when we make it with it and without it, every time I have it without it, it just always feels like it's leaving you. It's like wanting something more out of the sauce. So let's start with our aromatics now. To prepare the onions, what we're going to do is we're going to take the tops off, and then we're going to split them in half before peeling not only the skin, but the first layer of onion, because that first layer of onion is usually very latex-esque and rubbery, and we just don't want any of that getting into the sauce, because just quite frankly, it's gross. It's just really gross. Once we have the 3 halves of onions we plan on using, all that's left to do is dice them up. You can go however big or however small you prefer. I like to be able to notice them when the sauce is done cooking, so I don't go absolutely tiny or fine dice on these things. I just give them a quick little rough dicing, and then we move on. Also, I see a lot of people tossing out the butt end of the onion, because I don't know if they just consider it waste or they don't realize how much more onion you can get out of it. But you can get the maximum yield out of it if you repeat your vertical cuts like you did initially when we were preparing to dice the onion, and then just giving it the same treatment you would if it was another whole halved onion, if you will, or just another halved onion. So, and when you're done, you should end up with just the root itself barely intact, and like that should be at most the waste that you're left with when you're done. And then rookie mistake, we let the SD card get full, so you're gonna miss me dicing one more onion. Sorry, we're heartbroken, I know, but it's the best we got. And then we're gonna move on to the two most average looking carrots we've ever seen in their whole lives, and we're just gonna give them a quick little peel. Now, once they're peeled, we're going to just take them and pass them through the grater in whatever your medium coarse plate is. We don't want the finished product to have massive chunks of carrot in it. We don't want them to stew down and like they would if you were to braise them. But what we're looking for is to get them to kind of emulsify into the sauce. So after they cook down and become soft, they just homogenize, if you will, and then the texture will be unrecognizable when you're actually eating the sauce, but you'll get all of the depth and richness from cooking them out with the onions throughout the sauce, which is the most vital reason we're doing that, in addition to getting some natural sweetness out of the carrots as well. Next, let's talk about the other most important ingredient to tomato sauce outside of the tomatoes themselves, and that's the garlic. Now, all we're going to end up doing is taking the little root end off of them before giving them I'll call it a rough chop, where I first start out by turning the little garlic cloves into planks, and then giving them just a couple of pass-throughs with the knife before eventually adding some beautiful coarse salt, and then pressing them down into the board and pulverizing them so that we can end up with a garlic puree of sorts, where we're pulling out tons of liquid and tons of oils from the garlic itself naturally, which is going to help enhance the garlic flavor in the sauce later on. Now we get to jump into the fun part, the cooking. The cooking's the best part. So I add the oil here in 2 stages, and I like to lead with the olive oil first, just to kind of let it come up a little bit before dropping the butter in. I don't know why I do this. I don't think there's any benefit to doing this, but it's just, for me, it's fun, because then you get to dissolve the butter into the olive oil, and then it emulsifies, and it looks pretty cool. No, but really, it's all about just playing with your food. I think that's what I'm doing here. I can't actually think of any rhyme or reason why you would do what I just did there, but it do be looking cool, though. Once your oil is up to temperature, we're going to go in with our aromatics, which means we're dropping the onions and the carrots in first. We're going to get them all nice and mixed up, and we're going to cook those out for 5 to 10 minutes, just taking our time with this step, because, I mean, it's Italian food. Everything's kind of low and slow and takes a while, so. But also because we are trying to draw the natural sweetness of both the onions and the carrots out during this time, and then allow them to soften so that later on their textures aren't so abrasive or contrasting to the tomato sauce. Once everything in the pool has kind of softened and, calmed out, we're going to drop in our garlic, and then the house is going to smell absolutely incredible. We're going to end up giving the garlic probably 30 to 45 seconds to actually cook itself out a little bit before going in with our 2 bay leaves, which I crinkle there to kind of activate them a little bit, if you will, just to get them to start releasing their just natural oils and things like that. And then we're going to drop in the spice mixture, which is going to help intensify the aromatic flavors because of the salt. And in addition to that, it's going to kind of bring them back to life in the oil and water that's now in the pan from the oils we started with, and then the water that was released during the cooking process of the carrots and the onions. After giving them maybe, I don't know, we'll call it a minute or so, we're going to go in with the tomato paste, which, same as before, we're just trying to spread completely evenly throughout the pan. And you'll know when the tomato paste is cooked off because the oil will have kind of dyed itself an orangish red color by now. Now that the tomato paste is actually cooked out, we're going to drop in our tomato puree. Stir everything nice and evenly, scraping from the bottom to make sure nothing gets stuck and burns during the cooking process. And then the only thing to do from here is we have to bring it up to a boil and then drop it down to a simmer and cook it out for 30 to 45 minutes, up to 3 to 4 hours if you want. So we don't use any fancy filters or anything on our camera. So over the time lapse, you're actually gonna watch the sauce that starts kind of bright red. And as it cooks and reduces down, you're gonna watch that color intensify and deepen. And that's even before we go in with the balsamic vinegar, which will help give it more of that tomato sauce-esque color that you'd find in a jar at the store. But yeah, here we just have to let it do its thing and bubble away. And the longer you let it bubble away, the better the final product's actually going to end up being. Like I said, for the last 30 minutes or so, that's when we'll go in with the balsamic vinegar and sugar mixture, and just so that it can kind of bring those flavors out after they've really started developing. And then you can serve this any way you want, whether it be over pasta like we did here, finish with some beautiful Parmigiano Reggiano, or you can just dip some nice Italian bread into it, or you can, finish it with some chicken parm. Who knows? The sky's the limits. And if you guys liked what we do here, if you enjoyed the video, feel free to drop us a like and a follow. And if you're interested in seeing our chicken parm recipe, which I'm sure people will also hate, comment down below and let us know. Thanks again.